Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first ever, the inaugural, our maiden voyage for Red Tooth Games Weekly. I'm your captain, Neil Rivera, and I've brought along my co-captain, my co-pilot. You could say he's like a brother to me, Wesley Rivera. Wes,
Hey,
how are
there's
you?
icebergs ahead. Oh, I'm doing pretty good actually.
Oh,
How are
oh,
you?
there are icebergs up ahead, but
There
we're gonna
are.
try and avoid those. We're not gonna sink this ship. Not on the first week. We have a few more weeks before we can do that.
Yeah.
Welcome. This is our first ever podcast, Red Tooth Games Weekly. For those of you who are uninitiated, which should be all of you, it is going to be your weekly source for video game news, reviews, basically looking back on the week in video games and then turning around and giving you our perspective on it. We have lots of things to say about video games, and we hope you'll listen to them.
Basically, if you can play it or you can watch someone play it, we're going to talk about it.
Exactly. You can find us here primarily on Facebook, facebook.com/RedToothGames. We're also on Twitter at RedToothGames, and we're also on YouTube as well. YouTube, we are short about 60 subscribers. We're at 40 subscribers right now. If we could get to 100 subscribers, I could get a nice clean custom URL. So I could say you could find us at youtube.com/redtoothgames. How nice would that be? So if you haven't already, go over to YouTube, hit that subscribe button, just search for Red Tooth Games. I promise we'll be the first one to pop up. We really appreciate it, and your support obviously goes a very long way in helping us hit the ground running with tons of great gaming content, because who doesn't love great gaming content? Now, Wesley, before we jump into the meat of the show, we do have a rather meaty, girthy show for you all tonight. I want to ask you just a simple question, just to kind of break the ice. What have you been playing lately?
Well, unfortunately for me, I just got into computer gaming very heavily, and one of my guilty pleasures, and most people's guilty pleasures, are MMORPGs. And so I just finally started exploring Star Wars: The Old Republic. I was a huge fan of KOTOR and the second one, and it just feels great to kind of be back in that world.
Yeah, no, and I didn't really play a whole lot of the Old Republic when it first came out. I've kind of had this thing with MMOs where I'll jump in, I'll play it for a little bit, kind of get through the tutorial, and then tell myself, you know what? You know what this isn't is? You know what this isn't? World of Warcraft. And I'm a huge World of Warcraft addict. Every MMO I've played ever since it came out, I've unfortunately compared it to it, and World of Warcraft is just one of those games that it can't be topped, which is kind of a blessing and a curse, because I always find myself going back to it.
If you had to guesstimate, how much do you, like, back when monthly subscriptions was the thing, how much do you think you put into it?
Like dollars?
Dollar value, if you had to guesstimate.
God, I have no idea. I'd probably say I'm close to $1,000. I mean,
I would say about 1,000.
That's a rough guesstimate. And I mean, I thought you were going to ask me how many hours I've played, which I know the last time I checked on my main character, which that didn't include like alternate characters, just me screwing around in the game, was like over a month of playtime, like just on one character. Yeah, so that's like a month of my life just gone. But anyway, I've been playing. I've had the great opportunity to play the Sea of Thieves beta, which started a couple of days ago. Yeah, Rare hasn't put out a game in a while, and so Sea of Thieves kind of has had this mystique and this like this wave of interest behind it, just because it's something new, it's exciting. It's one of the games that when I went to E3 last year, unfortunately I didn't get a chance to play. It's kind of one of my big gaming regrets, or big regrets of E3, was that the lines were just too long and I couldn't get in to play it. But I was very eager to get in, jump into the beta, and it's pretty good. I mean, it's definitely an open-ended game. Like, Wes, you played a lot of No Man's Sky. I don't want to talk badly about it, but it does remind me a lot of No Man's Sky in that it is open-ended. It's kind of just like this vast open world. You kind of explore it at your own leisure. But it definitely has a level of polish, and there's definitely a whole lot more to do in it than No Man's Sky, at least at launch. Yeah, it's It's definitely cooperative. Like, it's definitely got a focus on the multiplayer aspect. Like, some parts of controlling your ship, navigating your ship, moving your ship, it requires multiple people. You can't, I mean, you need someone to control the sails and how, how fast your ship goes. You need someone looking at the map to tell you where you're going, how, what bearing you need your ship, and then obviously you need someone to steer. So it's definitely difficult to get into and play by yourself. So it'll be interesting to see how long I play it when it comes out, because it's really going to depend on how many people I have to play with.
Well, so when you tried it out, obviously you didn't have a group of friends that you knew right away. So you were pretty much, you were playing it by yourself.
Right. And I mean, so the game has like, the beta at least gives you 3 different options. It says, all right, we're going to drop you in. You'll be a part of a crew of 4 on a big ship. You'll kind of get the full experience. And then the second level is, well, it'll just be you and one other person on a small ship. And then the third one, which it even says we do not recommend this, we recommend this for more experienced players, is you by yourself on a ship, which, like I said, you are doing everything, like, controlling. And in order to, it's not like Assassin's Creed Black Flag, if you remember the sailing in that game, where it was like, oh yeah, I'm steering the ship and I'm lowering the sails and I'm raising the sails and I'm like, it's,
you have to go point to point.
Exactly. Like, if you want to lower the sails, you have to jump off the steering wheel and move over and bring the sails down. And meanwhile, you're heading straight to a rock and you crash into the rock, and then water starts flooding into the boat, and you got to patch up the boat and then get the bucket and get the water out of the, it's really, I mean, like I said, in terms of multiplayer, there's a lot of potential there for some crazy fun moments. The game also seems built for Twitch streaming, so I know a lot of people who, and if I remember correctly, it's like one of the most, if not the most streamed game on Twitch right now, the beta. So like, there's a lot of potential there, but it's, I guess, how it works out in the long term really just depends on, if people have friends and people that they know who are willing to play with them. So anyway, with moving along, we're going to get right into the meat of the show here. We're going to start off with the biggest headlines from this past week. And the first one, Wesley, is one that you sent to me, and I couldn't help but laugh a little bit. It is John Cena is in talks to play Duke Nukem. The article.
So you heard that title and you only laughed a little bit.
A little bit. The article I pulled came from Game Informer. So a Duke Nukem movie is being made. An invisible WWE superstar John Cena is in talks to play the titular role, according to a story by Hollywood Reporter. The movie is being produced by Michael Bay's production company, Platinum Dunes. At this point, there is no director attached or even a script. Hollywood Reporter speculates that once Cena signs on to the vehicle designed for him, a scriptwriter will be tapped to bring the foul-mouthed hero to the silver screen. Wesley, my question for you is simple. Why do we keep getting movies about shitty video games?
Well, I think it's we as the gamer community, it's mostly our fault, because we know these movies are going to be bad. We've learned our lesson time and time again, but we're still going to go see them. Another factor I'd like to attribute, especially with Duke Nukem, something like this, you have a just utter, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but you have like the bottom of the barrel filth, sort of, the Deadpool of the video game world, essentially.
I think you could say that. I think you could mean that in a bad way, and not a whole lot of people would fault you, but go on.
But, so Deadpool came out, and, just out of left field. I mean, yes, we've been wanting this kind of movie for some time, but then once it came out, everyone saw how successful it was. Now people are scrambling like, all right, well, we need to find something that can match this. We need to find something filthy and degenerate. And so like, hey, we got this guy named Duke Nukem.
Yeah. It's funny you bring the Deadpool connection in there, because I hadn't really considered that up until just now. I mean, I think Deadpool definitely sparked a kind of movement in the film industry where people kind of realized, hey, R-rated, foul-mouthed protagonist works for a movie. And like you said, it doesn't get any more foul mouthed and dirty than Duke Nukem. My concern, obviously, and another point of concern would be the fact that Michael Bay's production company is producing it. Not to say that Michael Bay himself is attached or involved in it, but obviously his name being attached in whatever way to this movie carries a certain amount of baggage. If you've watched any of his films, you just kind of get the feeling straight up between the fact that it's Duke Nukem and John Cena starring and Michael Bay produced. Like, you just get the feeling this isn't gonna be a good movie. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. What do you think about John Cena as Duke Nukem? Do you think he makes a good Duke Nukem?
I think anyone who has a certain amount of muscle span and has a face can easily play Duke Nukem.
Muscles and a pulse. Those are the requirements.
I mean, pulse is very, with CGI nowadays, you know, you just have to have a intact face.
Yeah, and I mean, if you played Duke Nukem Forever, I guess you could throw poop throwing into the requirements as well. Because I don't know if you played Duke Nukem Forever, but that was an integral part to the story of Duke Nukem.
I do remember throwing feces in the bathroom stalls. That's and great. while I'm expecting a figurative shit show with this movie, I am hoping for a literal one, at least one scene in which John Cena will throw some feces at someone.
Yeah,
or price of admission right there.
Yeah, I would have to say that would probably be the only thing to get me to buy a ticket. But we will have to wait and see. It looks like this movie is still very far off. It doesn't seem like there's even a script written for it. There's not even a director. So looks like it'll be quite a long time before we get to see Duke Nukem grace the silver screen. But moving along, and this is actually arguably the biggest story to come out of video games this past week. And it's interesting because we were talking about Sea of Thieves. It's the fact that all Microsoft Studios games are now going to be a part of Xbox Game Pass on the day that they release. So this article I pulled from IGN says that Microsoft has announced that all games from Microsoft Studios will now be added to the Xbox Game Pass subscription service on the release day, beginning with Sea of Thieves. Microsoft singled out Rare's online pirate adventure out on March 20th, adding that State of Decay 2, Crackdown 3, and unannounced games in the Halo, Forza, and Gears of War franchises will all be included. Wes, do you know what Xbox Game Pass is? Are you familiar?
I'm familiar in the sense that because I'm a PlayStation user, I know that it's very similar to PlayStation Now, or at least that it was sort of similar, but now things apparently are changing.
Well, and the you know, not to sound like an Xbox fanboy here, but I guess the one advantage that Xbox Game Pass could tout over PlayStation Now is that you can download the games and play them, whereas on PlayStation Now you're streaming them, and it really depends on the strength of your internet connection. It can result in like latency and all that kind of crap, you know, lower resolution textures and things like that. But this announcement is really huge because, I mean, you know, obviously Sea of Thieves is you know, a big first party title for Microsoft. It mentioned Crackdown 3 and State of Decay 2. And you know, those are big-ish games, but I think the more exciting news is the fact that, you know, unannounced games in the Halo, Forza, and Gears of War franchises, like, just to kind of put that in perspective, Xbox Game Pass is $9.99 a month. And obviously all of these games retail for $60. So, I mean, in theory, if you play 2 of these games within the span of a year, you've gotten the value out of Xbox Game Pass for an entire year subscription.
Yeah, absolutely. That is just quite the deal. And as a PlayStation user, it's hard for me to try to, you know, to sort of stand on solid ground. You know, the PlayStation Now, as with this news, it's sort of, if it wasn't shaky before, I can definitely feel something underfoot, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, as far as like Sony's response to it, I think it was very like, we still have no plans to do this at the time. So the question of like, well, will Sony do it too? I don't really think I see that happening. But it's interesting to see how this will affect game sales moving forward, because I know a big talking point in the gaming industry has been the conversion to digital media versus physical. And I know there was supposed to be with Steam this huge digital revolution that came, and it kind of hasn't really taken off yet. But also to kind of add more perspective to this, like Sea of Thieves is also an Xbox Play Anywhere game, which if you're not familiar with that program, it means if you have access to the digital version of the Xbox digital version of Sea of Thieves, you also have access to the PC version. So with that combined with the fact that I can cloud save and store saves on to my Xbox Live account, I can essentially play Sea of Thieves on my computer, go down and play it on my Xbox, and it's kind of this like exciting digital future that we've kind of been promised kind of come to life.
It's science fiction turned into science reality.
Yeah, and I mean, like, going like the Switch when it came out was probably the perfect console for me because of the portability factor, the fact that I can take it with me, I can play it anywhere, I can hook it up to my TV if I want to, I can play it in bed, I can play it on my couch. And this is, while not quite as open-ended as that, while not quite as like you can do anything, like it doesn't give you as much freedom. The fact that I can take my save game from my PC to my Xbox, take it to my friend's Xbox, it's really exciting. It got me really excited. So I actually started the free trial of the Game Pass. So I'm messing around with it right now. So we'll have to see if that ends up sticking and I stick with it, because I've been traditionally I've been a physical media guy, and I've been really hesitant to let go of that. I like my discs.
Well, I do have to take the opposite stance, because I spent the last 2 years converting my entire physical library all digital, and I have not looked back since.
Yeah. Well,
I miss the smell of new plastic, but it feels like everything's at your fingertips.
Yeah. It is annoying getting up from my couch and having to change games out, especially when it comes to streaming and recording, where I've got a PlayStation that's all the way upstairs. So.
Yeah.
Moving along and staying in that PlayStation kind of mentality, we got a release date for a game that we had been supposed to have a release date for what seems like forever ago, and one that had been rumored for a long time. Wesley, God of War, the reboot, Dad of War, you could say, is releasing on April 20th. What are your thoughts on that?
I think a lot of people at Sony are having a slightly light chuckle, very tongue-in-cheek.
Well, so did the game's director, Cory Balrog. He announced the game's release date via a PlayStation blog post. I'll just read a little bit from that. He says, "First, let me say that this is my favorite release day of my entire career. If I live to be 100, I do not think I will be able to top this release day. This has been a long journey just to reach this point, so it is a little bittersweet to think that we are only a few months away from that journey finally coming to an end. While I'm sad, I'm also excited because it means everyone will get their hands on this crazy adventure we have been crafting for nearly 5 years." Wes, are you excited for God of War? Are you excited for the reboot?
I am incredibly excited, because I took the time and I sort of rewatched the trailer the cinematic story trailer that they released with it. And it seemed to sort of answer questions that we've all been sort of asking, like what is Kratos doing? God of War took place in Greek mythology. This is apparently more Norse mythology.
I want to say that they came out and said that it's Scandinavian mythology, which is like
Scandinavian.
Yeah, they said something about it being like Scandinavian mythology is like super weird, so it allowed them to be like kind of goofy with it. So yeah, that's just kind of, I can't remember where that came from. I think it came from like an interview with Cory Balrog, the game director. But I think
so. It's this idea of because I read a little while ago that they're talking about, like, in the future they can visit Egyptian mythology and even Mayan mythology, maybe not with Kratos per se, but depending on what they reveal in this game.
Yeah.
who knows what could happen, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, I'm interested about that fact because I mean, I feel like there's only so much you could have done with Greek mythology, and I feel like they kind of got to a point where it started to get exhausted at the end of God of War 3.
Once you kill every Greek mythological character, you can't really do anything with them afterwards.
Right. It's kind of like, yeah, we've kind of killed just about everyone worth killing. There was that weird story with Athena that I just really didn't get. But I'm interested in a more subdued Kratos. I think a lot of people are excited about this game because it shows a more human side to Kratos, whereas in the first 3 games he's just, hey, I'm practically an unnamed badass who just kills everybody, and that was cool. And I, as a kid growing up, like that was all I needed to enjoy those games and love those games. So I'm excited to see that part. But what kind of has me nervous is that they're going in and saying this is going to be like a 25 to 30 hour game, which is like totally out of the norm for a God of War game. Those are usually like 10, 12 hours long. They're pretty linear. You run, you kill the guys, you do the things, and it's over. And this is definitely going to be like an open world, kind of, go at your own pace, explore, which for God of War seems really weird. Like I definitely enjoyed the fast-paced, high-action kind of moments in God of War. So making it open world seems like it'll kind of slow that down a bit. So it'll be interesting to see how it turns out.
I hate to make this comparison, but just from what I've seen and what we've all seen, this feels like they're sort of panning to that to the Logan sort of ideal. Like, here you've had this character, this nonstop, murder machine for like 10 plus years. But now we can see that there's actually, there's compelling story that can come from a character like this. We can really see, a human side to someone like this.
Right. And I think that'll be a good part, or a good point of it. Their relationship with the son and stuff like that. I think Sony's at a point right now where they have such a comfortable lead that they can bring back these popular IP that they've already established and kind of experiment with them. So I think God of War is in a prime example where it's kind of due for a reboot. They had such great success with Horizon Zero Dawn last year that making God of War a very similar kind of game seems to make sense. So I think based on the success of Horizon Zero Dawn, obviously given the fact that God of War has sold really well in the past, I think they'll do fine.
I agree, and I know, and I don't want to say bad. I think at the very worst, the new God of War will be okay.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll be awful, but when I say good or bad, I just don't want to appear to say like bad.
Well,
but good or bad, I think it's going to be quite an amazing journey for us and for Kratos.
Well, we'll have to see if that holds to be true. But moving on to a game that's not doing so hot, Destiny 2 is struggling right now. This actually came from CNBC, so it's very rare that you actually get the mainstream news outlets covering video games. That kind of gives you a look into how bad Destiny is doing, apparently.
Yeah.
So this is coming from this coming from CNBC. This is kind of a longer one, so kind of stay with me here. Player interest in Activision Blizzard's Destiny 2 is dropping, which will hurt the game publisher's add-on revenue this year, one Wall Street firm predicts. Cowen reiterated its market perform rating on Activision Blizzard shares, citing increasing evidence players are leaving the Destiny community. And they're quoted, while Call of Duty 2 World War II clearly had a great holiday, which likely sets up strong franchise live service revenue in 2018, Destiny 2 is struggling right now with player engagement appearing to be on the wane, analyst Doug Kreitz wrote in a note to clients Tuesday entitled Destiny is not in a good place. He went on to say that several key Destiny video streamers have announced that they will reduce content for the game in the future. He noted Twitch viewership for the game is at franchise low levels, averaging 4,000 to 7,000 viewers on Twitch on Friday afternoons versus 14,000 to 17,000 for Destiny 1 year ago. So he goes on, he shares 4 key reasons why he believes the game is faltering. Number 1, design decisions were made that have made Destiny 2 a less engaging and less distinctive game than Destiny 1. In particular, key aspects of the Destiny 2 endgame feel neutered compared to Destiny 1. Microtransaction implementation, while not nearly as problematic as in Star Wars Battlefront 2, has still been a source of player unhappiness. Number 3, Bungie's apparent urgency in responding to player feedback has been disappointing. And number 4, until recently, Bungie did a poor job of communicating its roadmap going forward, particularly compared to the more open stance of many other live service games. And that's a lot to unpack. Wesley, I know you're not exactly embedded in the Destiny community, but what were your thoughts of Destiny when you did play it?
I think this has been a long time coming for Destiny in particular. When I first got on the Destiny train, it was the very first beta, the public beta that they released for the first game, and right away I was like, something is just completely off. And at the time, it just felt like another, Halo with a new shade.
Yeah.
That's all. And so I was sort of at that point where I was like, I don't need, I'm looking for a new game. I'm not looking for the same type of game with a new skin. And so I decided to stay away from it. But I did eventually buy and play Destiny for a little while, despite my reservations.
Right.
And immediately, I was just like, yep, this is exactly what I was talking about. And I just backed away from it. But mind you, eventually towards the end of Destiny, it became a very full and complete game.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with you on that, where like the hype train definitely got the best of us, at least in the early going. It's interesting that in his first point that he brings up that Destiny 2 is a less engaging and less distinctive game than Destiny 1, particularly the fact that Destiny 2's end game feels like pared down compared to Destiny 1, because Destiny 1, when we first got into it, was holy shit, this game has no content. Once you beat the story campaign, you're just kind of doing the same stuff over and over and over again. And for us, that's, for people who like, your traditional shooters and your campaigns and stuff like that, you kind of want something to keep you coming back every day, and doing the same stuff over and over didn't really do it for me. But at the same time,
comment. Oh, but I was just saying his comment on how it was it's more disappointing, or it wasn't as satisfying as the first Destiny. Yeah. Was he talking about Destiny upon release, or Destiny at the end of the end of the first?
He's definitely talking about by the end of Destiny 1, because I mean, by the end of Destiny 1, it was very much, this is the game that we should have got at release date. There wasn't, there was a ton of content there. But at the same time, I think at that point, the damage had already kind of been done. You kind of had chased off the more casual people. And what's interesting is that, in spite of that, Destiny kind of cultivated this really hardcore, passionate fan base that played the game for hundreds and thousands of hours, despite the fact that there wasn't a ton of content. Destiny 2, however, they kind of turned it around and said, all right, well, we want to appeal to the more casual crowd. We want to, release stuff that has a little bit more, varied content. And it ended up turning off the more hardcore crowd, because in the end, there wasn't anything to keep them coming back day after day. So I think Destiny's kind of just in a weird place right now where they can't please anybody. So I think Bungie's going to have to make some really tough decisions about where they want the game to go for the future, and then obviously for what will inevitably be a Destiny 3 whenever that does come out.
Well, it seems only fair that they go out of their way to appease their longtime, more dedicated fans, because, that could have completely sunk and flopped halfway through Destiny's, its first run. But thankfully, those dedicated hardcore fans really kept it afloat, and, it prospered.
Right. And I mean, that kind of feeds into his third and fourth points that he makes, is that Bungie has done a pretty poor job. If you haven't been following it, Bungie the Destiny 2 has come under a ton of criticism, especially mostly from the hardcore fans of Destiny 1, and Bungie has done a really bad job of responding to the criticism, A, in a timely manner, and B, with stuff that makes it right. Usually, I remember the big one was the how the UI was lying about how much experience activities were giving you. And that actually, if you were redoing the same activities over and over again, you were actually getting less experience. And the fact that that's a bold-faced lie from Bungie as a publisher or as a developer. And their response to that was took them super long to reply. They didn't really roll out any kind of sweeping changes. Eventually they kind of just yep, this is something we didn't intend for it to, we'll fix the UI and that's it. They didn't really do anything to smooth over the fears that people had about that. They just kind of let them keep going. And then obviously due to the fact that the game has a lack of endgame content beyond the first expansion, we don't know what's coming for Destiny. So as a result, there's no reason for people who are invested in it to keep investing into it.
Yeah.
So it's it's a shame, but I feel kind of like you said, where I feel like it's kind of been a long time coming. And I hate to say that because Bungie make really fun games as far as the shooting mechanics go. Destiny was just such a disappointment because it felt like it was a cash grab, or not even felt like it was a cash grab. It just felt like I wasn't getting $60 worth of content out of it. And, I know they can make better, more well-developed games than that.
I hope that, this is entirely a huge wake-up call for Bungie. I hope they sort of get themselves where they need to be.
Yeah.
Not dedicated gamers, casual gamers, just whatever you do, just get back to the original formula, because with the original formula with Halo and everything, everyone was happy.
Right. So and we'll have to see where that goes. That actually transitions very nicely into our last story. Speaking of open-ended games as service style games, Bioware is doubling down on Anthem as pressure mounts. Pressure coming obviously from EA. So this was a story pulled from Kotaku, written by the amazing Jason Schreier. If you do not follow Jason Schreier, if you're somewhat even a tiny amount interested in how games are made and kind of the behind the scenes stuff, the things that go on in the offices of these developers and publishers, Jason's a great follow. He's a great writer. So he writes for Kotaku. Anthem, which was announced at E3 2017, is now scheduled for release in early 2019, according to 3 people familiar with the project. The fall 2018 window mentioned during the E3 announcement was, quote, never realistic, one source said. Exact dates remain in flux, and Anthem's developers must also plan for a beta release, an EA Access launch, and an ongoing schedule of patches and updates. But it appears unlikely to developers that publisher EA will allow BioWare to delay the game any further than March 2019, when the company's 2019 fiscal year comes to an end. I think he meant 2018 fiscal year.
Yeah.
It's going on. He says it's not unusual for BioWare to pull staff from other projects as it enters the final year of production on a game. In recent years, BioWare has done the same for both Mass Effect Andromeda and Dragon Age Inquisition. But Anthem, the studio's first new franchise in 8 years, and EA's first big stab at a Destiny-style persistent online world, feels different. To BioWare staff, the stakes feel higher than they ever have. As one developer told me, there's a belief that if Anthem doesn't live up to EA's expectations, BioWare will look very different in the future, especially after the disappointment of Mass Effect Andromeda led to EA absorbing BioWare Montreal into the studio EA motive. Now, Wesley, you're a big BioWare fan. Obviously, you mentioned, Knights of the Old Republic and the Old Republic. I feel like I'm the same way, where I feel like we've invested a lot in BioWare, their games over the years. Do you think BioWare can pull it off with Anthem?
I think in the end, BioWare will pull it off by today's standards. The game will be released. around that time, maybe a little sooner, but like every game that's coming out, it's not going to be the end product. On top of, it's not even going to be the end product, the beta of a game end product that they were planning on releasing anyways. I think it's going to be Destiny all over again. And I think EA needs to take a step back. They need to let go of what is a very tight grip on BioWare, because what we were just talking about, Bungie is failing its consumers. Destiny is not what it used to be. And EA and BioWare are like, hey, we're about to release this, we're releasing the Destiny, competition here.
Yeah.
They need to double down, not so much on releasing it sooner, but they need to double down and make this a premium game. Because with BioWare, you have amazing moments in gaming thanks to BioWare. And with Anthem, it could be a whole new generation of gaming. I'm talking this could be a huge franchise. But if EA wants the money, they're going to have to be patient if they want real quality. And we've seen time and time again that EA does not really care so much about quality, so much more about profits and numbers.
Right. And I mean, I think kind of to your point, the pressure at BioWare definitely stems from the fact that you kind of get the feeling that Anthem needs to be better than Destiny. Destiny was kind of the first foray of AAA games into this open, persistent, shared world genre where you're kind of constantly working towards something. Then you had The Division with Ubisoft. And so now I feel like at this point we're a few years into, this being a trend in games. Anthem needs to be good. Anthem needs to be solid. It needs to be feature complete. It can't come out and feel like Destiny where you feel like, oh, well, this game's missing a lot of stuff. And, at that point, you start feeling like you're being nickeled and dimed on DLC packs and expansions and whatnot. I don't think, and I agree with you, I don't think EA can have their cake and eat it too. If you want this game to succeed and you want this game to be better than Destiny, to be the Destiny killer, quote unquote, you need to give it some time and let it breathe. Now, we don't know how long this game's been in development. I want to say it's been in development for at least 3 or 4 years. Not 100% sure on that. So I think 3 or 4 years that it's been in development plus an extra year and a half, that puts it at 5, maybe 6 years of development. I think at that point, you need to have something. There's something that needs to be, it needs to be either close to completion or pretty much complete at that point. And if it's not, then of course you got bigger problems than that. But
of course.
Yeah, and I agree with you in that, EA just seeing that the fact that EA wants to release it by March 2019, no matter what. If there's a game-killing bug in it, if there's, all sorts of glitches, whatever. Now, granted, that probably won't be the case because we expect better from BioWare. We know them. But think about Mass Effect Andromeda. That shipped with a ton of bugs in it. And guess when it shipped? It shipped around March of 2017.
That's very foreboding.
So it's just kind of one of those things where, you give it a couple of months, iron out all the kinks, maybe it'll be a better experience.
Statistically, looking at what's going to happen, there are two possibilities here. One, they're just going to do what EA always does, which is release a pretty much an unfinished product. They will make their numbers goal.
Yeah.
They will make the sales that they want, whether it's finished or not. I'm gonna buy it. I'm gonna. You got flying suits of armor, and it's made by BioWare. Well, I'm already gonna get it.
Yeah, you're a part of the problem then.
I am absolutely a part of the problem, but they will make that short-term goal of let's try to make this much money off of this game. But if for some reason someone working at EA is listening to this, they take this advice and they actually, maybe they push it back a little bit more, or maybe they focus more manpower onto making, helping Bioware get this made. We put premium quality gaming into this. You have something that long term will make triple what you're going to end up making.
Yeah.
This, franchise, this could spin off, maybe even a game spin off. This,
Right. I mean, and not just BioWare, because I mean, obviously the article kind of hints at BioWare being in a tight situation. I think EA as a publisher is just desperate for a win. I mean, when you look at 2017, they just had a really shitty year, talking about Mass Effect Andromeda coming out and being like, it ended up being a good game after they fixed it, but the writing was already on the wall at that point, where it had come out, it was buggy, there's all these GIFs out there for the goofy facial animations and walking, and then you move from that into, the sports stuff is fine. I think as far as, FIFA, Madden, NHL are concerned, they're great. NBA Live is still garbage, but that's a whole other story. But then you move from that into Need for Speed Payback and Star Wars Battlefront 2 in the fall. And like those games, obviously Star Wars Battlefront 2 just had massive amounts of controversy around them about just how aggressive the microtransactions were and how it just felt like you were constantly being pressured. And I think with a game like Anthem, there's a lot of genuine excitement about it. I think it's a great idea. It's a great, like, the setting looks great. The visuals look awesome. I'm really interested in that world. But the fact that EA's name is attached to it has me nervous.
I think at this point, any game that, will come out in the future and EA's tied to it, it's going to make everyone uncomfortable, right. Especially like with last year and like, going forward now. EA slowly becoming this very... It's not going to be the way that people looked at EA. Right.
I mean, but at some point it comes down to people need to vote with their wallets, because at the same time they're making these games and still selling them. Despite all the shitstorm around Star Wars Battlefront 2, I think it ended up in the top 5 of like the best-selling games of December.
I bought it.
So, I mean, yeah, and I mean, it is what it is. Despite all of that, people now, granted, some of that is it was packed in with PlayStation systems. They did knock down the price during the holidays, so how sales of that game will hold up over time will depend. But at some point, people who are pissed off about EA need to make a stand and say, well, I'm not going to buy these games.
Yeah, it's a matter of it's the power of willpower. You have to we as a gaming community have to put our foot down and say, not a step further. You will not drag us further into this just complete shitstorm of gaming.
Right. Well, speaking of shitstorms, and I mean shitstorms of the good kind, we did have a few, and by a few, I mean we had 2 games released this week, 2 high-profile games this week. Obviously, we are nearing the end of January, so there's not been a whole lot to play. But as of today, as of this recording, that is completely different. We had 2 big releases in Dragon Ball FighterZ and Monster Hunter World. So if you're looking at reviews for those games, Dragon Ball FighterZ scored an 88 on Metacritic, which is damn good for a fighting game. It got a 9 out of 10 from GameSpot. It's rocking an 8.5 from IGN. The general consensus being that the controls in the game are simple enough to where anyone can pick it up, learn how to play, pull off the flashiest, coolest looking combos, and also the fact that the game is super true to the anime, resembles it so well in not only its visual style, but just the way everything on the action on screen is presented. Wes, we played a whole lot of Dragon Ball Z, or played a little bit of Budokai, but we watched a whole lot of Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah, we watched more Dragon Ball than we played Dragon Ball, but we still did play a good bit.
Right. Are you excited at all about jumping into Dragon Ball FighterZ?
I was actually talking to a friend at work about it just today, and he is incredibly excited. We both sort of dropped off. We sort of put Dragon Ball and that world like to the back of the head, but then all of a sudden, here comes this rekindling of what is a childhood classic, and the idea of jumping back into that world, and it's exciting. I would like to get my hands on it, like right now.
Yeah, and I think it's coming out. It's a combination of it's coming out at the perfect time. There's not a whole lot to play, but it's also like hitting the right nostalgia notes. Not only in the fact that it's Dragon Ball Z, you've got all these different characters that you've grown up knowing, but the fact that it so resembles the anime. When I got to play it at E3, that was the part that blew me away. Was, oh my god, like it feels like I'm watching the episode, when you pull off your finishing move and it zooms out and shows the big explosion, as it did so often in the show. It kind of just gives you chills, and it feels like Dragon Ball Z finally got a proper fighting game. Not to say that they haven't had bad games, but when you look at the previous highest rated Dragon Ball Z game, it was Budokai 3 on the PS2 in 2007, and it maxed out at 77 on Metacritic. So
it has been a while since a solid one came out.
Yeah, since a good one, and not only that, but like Dragon Ball FighterZ is like head and shoulders better than the best Dragon Ball fighting game we've ever had. So it's good. It's good for that franchise. It's good for fans of that series. I'm with you right there. I'm really excited. I'm actually probably gonna download it here as soon as we're done recording this podcast. So we'll see. The second one, as I mentioned, was Monster Hunter World. This is another one that a lot of people are excited about. And it was, at the time of this recording, it's rocking a 91 on Metacritic, which is insane.
Wow.
Yeah, IGN giving it a 9.5, Game Informer giving it a 9.5, GameSpot a little bit lower at an 8 out of 10. But the general consensus is that it's familiar enough for both fans of the series, but it adds enough and it feels fresh enough. Like it's got that really pretty graphic style that makes it appealing to new fans. Because I'll be honest with you, I haven't played really a Monster Hunter game. I haven't really cared about that franchise, but the fact that this game looks so damn good makes me want to jump in and play it. Wes,
I've been watching clips. I'm really excited, and it feels like one of those kind of games for me with RPGs, and I will say RPG is like my favorite type of game. But so games that have at least like 30% lore within their, like, that's amazing for me. And I feel like this is going to be like, this is probably one of those games that's so full of like this rich history and just like stuff that you can learn about it.
Well, and it's crazy because there's a lot of, I don't want to say fan service, but there's a lot of stuff, I guess we'll call it lore, in the Monster Hunter games that is there for people who have consistently played it. It's kind of like, everyone knows what a chocobo is if you've played Final Fantasy, whereas fans of Monster Hunter know, like, there's no common animals in Monster Hunter. So you definitely got all these unique creatures, and obviously the scale is just impressive and massive, and it just makes you feel like you're fighting these giant beasts. And the fact that it's co-op makes it even all the better.
Yeah, that sounds exciting, and it just looks like it's just going to be nothing but like just a blast.
Right. So we'll have to wait and see when we get our hands on that one. I'm eager to do it, but I just don't know when I'll do it. I'm more eager to jump into Dragon Ball FighterZ right now, but we'll see after the Sea of Thieves beta ends. I'll probably jump into some Monster Hunter. Looking ahead now. Looking ahead at big releases next week. There's not a whole lot. It's not as big of a release week as this week was, but there are a few major titles. On Monday, you're looking at the beginning of the Age of Empires Definitive Edition multiplayer beta. That is obviously the remaster of the classic real-time strategy game, Age of Empires classic game. Tuesday, we are getting the Resistance DLC for Call of Duty World War II, which, if I'm not mistaken, is just more multiplayer maps and what else?
It's a continuing chapter on the zombies,
Right, right.
the Darkest Shores. I think it's a new map and new like zombie campaign. I'm not sure how those zombie games work on Call of Duty
Yeah.
anymore, but I know it's a continuation of it.
Well, it's like it's become this huge like subgenre of Call of Duty where people, I remember back in the day people would always talk about like, oh yeah, I buy Call of Duty just for the multiplayer, whereas now it's like, oh, I buy Call of Duty for zombies. It's become this huge part of that franchise. I would say more predominantly than the single player campaigns.
Yeah, absolutely. Just the like going as far back as like Halo 2 when people would try to create their own like custom zombie game. It
Right.
seems that with shooters and fighting off hordes of the undead, there's nothing quite as exciting for some people,
Right, right. I remember you playing that stupid zombie game on Halo.
I do have fond memories of
was-
playing that stupid zombie games on Halo.
Moving along on next week's releases, we've got Dissidia Final Fantasy NT also releasing on Tuesday. That is the fighting game set in the Final Fantasy universe. And based on everything I've heard from that game, whereas Dragon Ball FighterZ feels like it's accessible and it's easy to learn and simple to pull off these moves, Dissidia is very much this like technical, difficult, almost cumbersome fighting game. So it kind of feels like a shame because you'd think a fighting game featuring your favorite characters from Final Fantasy history would be a knock, like a guaranteed knock out of the park. But we'll have to wait and see what the reviews are. But I think the general consensus is not going to be as good as Dragon Ball FighterZ.
Probably not.
And another fighting game releasing on Tuesday, technically, is UFC 3, but that's only via the Champions Edition of the game. Let me hop on my soapbox here for a minute and tell you why EA is shitty. And
EA is not getting love from us right now.
EA is not, and don't let this think that we hate EA. I love EA. I'm actually making a video. My next video is going to be about what I would do if I were EA to kind of garner some gamer goodwill. Because I feel like that's all they need to do is just garner some gamer goodwill. But you know how you don't garner gamer goodwill? It's by releasing an $80 version of a game 1 week before the regular worldwide release. So if you're EA, if you want to play UFC 3, you got three options. You got EA Access, which gives you the earliest access. Then you got UFC 3 Champions Edition, which is the $80 deluxe edition of the game, which comes with like some, in-game items and whatever. But then you've got the UFC 3 Standard Edition, which releases next Friday, February 2nd. So it's confusing. Like, you and I, it makes sense to us because we're like embedded in video games and like we frequent GameStops and Best Buys and always looking on Amazon, so we're familiar with these things. But if you're Joe Blow off the street and you walk into Best Buy and you're like, oh shit, there's a UFC game here, but it's $80, I don't get it. Like it just seems like EA's taking advantage of people who don't pay attention to like release dates.
Yeah, EA just sort of cash grab as best as you can, and it's disheartening to see. It gets worse and worse every year.
Yeah, I talk about it. I touch on it a little bit in my video, but not to sound too negative. Like I said, I'm offering constructive criticism to EA, so we'll see how they take that moving forward. Hopefully, I can get that video out to you before they do some stuff that makes my predictions less accurate. The final big-ish release that we're looking at next week is Night in the Woods on Switch. And this is one that kind of excites me a whole lot because it was one of the more underrated, underappreciated games of 2017. That and What Remains of Edith Finch. Wes, have you heard of Night in the Woods at all? Did you hear anything about it?
I heard very small whispers of it. With me, I love a good indie game.
Yeah.
And my problem is I never get my hands on them, and that upsets me, and I know I need to do better. So
Yeah.
that should have been my resolution for 2018.
Well,
Maybe it
and
could be.
well, and the Switch kind of feels like a great home for indie games. I know a lot of people adopted the PlayStation Vita as like this champion for indie games, and it very much deserved that. But the Switch just feels perfect, where in between big, huge tentpole Nintendo releases, you've got dozens of great indie games dropping for it. For those of you who haven't heard of Night in the Woods, haven't seen anything about Night in the Woods, it's a very simple story. It's kind of one of these traditional click. God, I can't think of the word. It's like a traditional
text-based.
point and click. It's traditional point and click adventure, like the old text based adventures, like Ron Gilbert's Escape from Monkey Island and stuff like that, where you play as a cat who goes off to college and like moves to a new town, starts a new life, and definitely, you know, when you're kind of in your early 20s, late teens, it's a very exciting time where you get to go and like, I get to start my own life and do all this. But it turns out very badly. He either fails out of school or loses a job or something or another, and ends up moving back to his hometown. And so the story is all about him reconnecting with friends, and you know, this very small community. You and I grew up in a very small community, so it kind of hits on those notes for me, and it also plays on different things like social anxiety in general, and it was nominated along with Hellblade for the Game Awards Games for Change Award. Which obviously Hellblade won because it was fantastic and deserving, but it definitely, from what I've heard, tackles like not mental illness, but maybe, you know, like different like social disorders really well.
Do you feel like games need to start maybe diverting down this path, maybe a bit more, maybe a bit faster, you feel?
I think they're doing it at a good pace. You definitely don't want it to become the quote-unquote trendy thing to do in games, where like now suddenly every game is talking about mental illness. I think games like Hellblade, and based on what I've heard, Night in the Woods, are successful and popular as they are because they did it really well. Hellblade exceptionally so. Like it just, its portrayal of depression and psychosis was just jarring and just realistic. So
for maybe someone who doesn't understand how those sort of things work, playing Hellblade is a real eye-opener for a world that you might not understand, essentially.
And the fact that those games did it so well is because of the fact that they were very aware of it. You know, like I said, if you're going down this path and making it just because it's the trendy, cool thing to do, you risk portraying it in the wrong way, the wrong light. Which
you could
obviously
risk like the whole trend itself, essentially.
Right.
You know?
And you know, the last thing you want to do is misportray something as sensitive as like depression or anxiety. So I hope it doesn't become the next trend. I hope, you know, the games that are doing it well continue to do it well, and the developers and the writers that do it well continue to do it well.
Just handle it with the respect that it deserves.
Absolutely. Speaking of deserving respect, we're going to end the show off with This Week in Gaming Madness. This comes via a YouTuber named Randy Ladyman, who does the unthinkable. He completes in 100% Through the Fire and the Flames on Guitar Hero 3. But here's the catch. Obviously, this is on expert difficulty. Here's the catch. He does the whole thing while he's wearing a goddamn blindfold.
Mother. I watched it too, and I didn't think it was gonna happen, but he hammer-on and pulled it off.
Hey, that's a good pun. The thing is, like, I knew what I was getting myself into when I watched the video. Like, when I clicked on it, like, oh, this guy is wearing a blindfold. But, like, actually sitting there and watching him do it, like, And not only that, but just knowing, like, from having played, like, attempting to play through the Fire and the Flames on Expert, like, goddamn, like, not only is it hard enough to beat that game, to beat that song, not only is it hard enough to 100% that song, but to do it while you're wearing a freaking blindfold is ridiculous.
It you know, just watching it sort of gave me flashbacks to when you and I were playing it way back when we were little.
Right, and I remember, like, we had agreed that, like, what was our system? I would
So
tap.
I did the fingering.
Yeah, you did the fingering.
Ah.
But you would tap the note, you would tap the notes, and then I would
And you do the strumming.
because like, I had the better sense of rhythm, whereas,
You're
like,
the drummer.
you could hit the notes right.
And
It's crazy because we did that and we still fucking failed the song. Like, it's not like that helped us at all. Like, we still failed it spectacularly.
Oh yeah,
So,
I mean, I think we finally did get to a point where we were able to complete it at like a 70%.
no, I never beat that song on Expert, so you must be high on drugs. Because
I mean,
I never beat that song on
was
Expert.
it was a very wild time for me.
But anyway, we're going to throw that link down in the description if you're watching on YouTube. If I find a way to do it on Facebook, I'll do it as well. But that's going to end our show. We really appreciate you guys watching. Once again, this was Red Tooth Games Weekly. You'll find us every week here at facebook.com/redtoothgames. That's where you can find the majority of our stuff. We're also on YouTube at Red Tooth Games. I'm not going to waste your time saying whatever URL we have because it's ridiculous. Just go in there, search for Red Tooth Games, hit the subscribe button so I can get a nice clean URL, and then find us on Twitter. Just find us on all the social media networks, Red Tooth Games. Give us a follow, give us a like, give us a subscribe. We really appreciate it. It allows us to help.
A like and a subscribe helps you survive. I tell you.
Exactly. This man gets it. So once again, we appreciate you joining us. And until next week, thank you.